apologize for the barrage of emails if you've gotten them from me. This is not our typical time that we'll be meeting. In fact, you'll be compensated for your time when we start meeting around 3 to 4:30 p.m. But today, this was the time we could fit in a quick introduction to the work today. So you'll be getting emails from me, and then I'll be compiling a list of your addresses, and we'll be mailing the books to your homes, the Grading for Equity books. So just check for those probably next week sometime. And I know Josh will talk more about the book as well. So welcome. If you have questions, you can always email Josh or you can email me as well.
Thanks for starting us off, Mindy. Excuse me. So again, just as a heads up, if you came, I just started recording here. So my name is Josh Kunith. Thanks for coming. And I'm excited about our work together. So I want to thank you for taking time today. I want to thank you in advance for hopefully in the future continuing with us. But I would like you to take an opportunity this session just to kind of see if it's a good fit for you. Because one of the really important things that we know for any reform to happen, it has to be a good fit. We want everybody to completely buy in and to make it a good fit for both for you and for your classroom and for your students. So in this hour, want to give you an idea about what we're doing, right? What our plans are for this cohort, and a little bit idea about the book that we're using as our framework. You a couple ideas maybe to start implementing. Maybe you want to hold off on that. Either way. And that's what we're trying to do. So I want to give a thank you to Mindy for her work that she's already done, and that the ongoing work with this, and as far as coordinating with the district. She's going to be doing some connections between grading practices and curriculum instruction. And we have teachers here. Some of you, quite a few of you are in English. Some of you are in other subjects as well. This is really a grassroots effort. So we appreciate whatever department or school that you're in to continue to spread the word, to be a part of this, implement in your classroom. And because we know this is the best for our students, right? And so again, thank you for coming. I want to thank also Laura Huntington from Ridgeview, and she's part of our first cohort, and she's also kind of come aboard of our team and is going to be working in all the cohorts, and she's going to be focusing on action research. And also Melissa Donez at the district, she's given us a lot of helped us with that support so we can continue doing this stuff. And as Mindy mentioned, our normal time in the future is going to be 3 to 4:30, and you will be compensated for your time. So thanks for coming. Appreciate that. I think this is important stuff, and hopefully you will as well. So here's our agenda. I sent that out earlier today. I don't know if you got a chance to see it. I know everybody's really busy here, but I mentioned we're talking about the purpose of work. Actually, immediately next we'll do some readings. I have a couple discussions in here. I'm going to talk about some problems with traditional grading. Going to throw out a practice to consider. And I'm going to do a brief intro to action research and talk next steps. We'll see how much we fit in, maybe a little overpacked agenda, but want to make it worth your time, hopefully. So if we could do a brief introduction here. We have, let's see, about 15 people right here from the cohort, or 14, 15, something like that. So we just go around, you can share your name, school site, your subject, and then gotta mix in some literacy here. What's the last book that you read? Okay, I'm just gonna go kind of in the order of my screen here. Kendall, do you mind starting for us?
No, not at all. Hi, everybody. I'm Kendall Marshall. Oh, it says that right there on my name. Okay. I teach at Shafter, and I'm a 11th grade ELA and yearbook. And the last book that I read, well, I'm actually reading right now to my class. We're reading The Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian, which they are digging. I mean, they love it. There's been a couple of places where I had to make sure they read it themselves because I was really uncomfortable as a 61-year-old woman teacher saying those words, especially because you don't know who's walking in their background. So I'm like, okay, you guys read this part. And then they were like really nice. They'd come back in and go, Okay, we understand. I won't even tell you what it was, but talk about getting the kids hooked on a book, right? Because it's like, I can't read this section to you. Anyway, as far as my own personal book, the last one I read was, and I can't off the top of my head say his name, but the guy who wrote the Hamilton book that Lin-Manuel Miranda, so the big giant book
Oh, okay.
that he was reading on, and I can't think of the guy's name, that Lin-Manuel Miranda was reading on his honeymoon, and then from that book wrote Hamilton. And if you haven't read it, yeah, thank you, turn out.
Oh, okay.
Phenomenal.
Right.
I mean, it really is. Anyway, so
Thanks, Kendall.
That's
Thanks,
me.
and thanks for being here.
thanks, Heather.
Laura, can you introduce yourself to everybody?
Yeah, Laura Huntington from Ridgeview. I teach math. I just finished the book Scythe. We read it for a book club at Ridgeview, so that was interesting reading.
Great. Kids love that book.
Yeah, that's what they said. As someone that's read a lot of science fiction, I found it a little bit repetitive. I don't know, it wasn't unique or new by any means, but yeah, the librarian said the kids really like it.
Yeah. Thanks, Laura. Mark?
Mark Chanel, and I happen to be married to Laura Huntington, by the way. So I'm a centennial. I teach chemistry and physics. And the last book, I've been trying to think what the last book I finished. I've been reading, the name is escaping me. Eric Larson's book, The Splendid and the Vile.
Great book.
I'm trying to remember what I read before that, but the question I'd ask for you is, what's the last math problem you did?
I helped my daughter with some math this morning, if that counts. Some multiplication.
That you did for pleasure, like you're reading though.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Those don't go together. Sorry. I don't want to offend anybody here off the bat. That'd be a bad first impression. Thanks for being here, Mark. I appreciate that. I believe we have, the last count, 4 husband-wife teams in this work overall of our 3 cohorts, including you guys. So, all right. How about Catherine?
Hello, I'm Catherine Rodriguez, and I teach ELD at South. The last book that I read was The Faithful Executioner, Life and Death, Honor and Shame in the Turbulent 16th Century. It was really interesting. I suggest you guys read that. If you're into history. And the next book that I just got it, the next book that I'm starting is the prequel to the Pillars of the Earth series, The Evening and the Morning by Ken Follett. And yeah, so that's on my list.
Great. Sounds interesting. Thanks for sharing, Catherine. Can we go to Cody?
Hey gang, my name's Cody. I teach English at Ridgeview. And I've kind of read these 2 books in tandem. So this book is called Mediocre, The Dangerous Legacy of White Male America by Ijoma Olua, or I can never pronounce her name, but she also wrote So You Want to Talk About Race. And then I also read Noliwe Rook's book, Cutting School, Privatization, Segregation, and the End of Public Education. I am very excited about The Sum of Us that should be out or coming out by Heather McGee. But all of them kind of deal with racial dynamics and yeah. And Mark, I love statistical analysis. So whenever I come across a data set, I love finding trends. So I think I did that a couple nights ago. So that's me.
Thanks, Cody. Thanks for being here. We have 4 school sites, I think, represented so far by my last count. Can we go to Craig?
Hi, Craig Holliday. I teach history at BHS, U.S. history and European history. Last book that I'm reading Sapiens, which is a fantastic book about early history. Oh, look at that. That was not even planned by a BHS person. Look at that. Some driller unity across the ways. Well done, Deborah. As far as math problems go, my kids have to do those, kind of middle school Agent Ultra ones. I love those. Those are awesome. So I really do get some pleasure out of those.
Great. Thanks for coming. Craig. And so we have about 5 school sites here so far represented. Let's go to Deborah.
Hi, my name is Deborah. I teach biology at BHS, and also like Craig, I am reading *Sapiens*. This also has a lot of biology aspect to it, along with history, so it's been pretty fun, but I haven't got too far. With the nonfiction reading, I was just rereading Harry Potter series, so I just finished the 3rd one, *Prisoner of Azkaban*, which is great book.
Great, thanks, Deborah, and thanks for being here. Let's see, can we go to Heather, please?
All right, we're on a driller streak here. My name's Heather and I teach theater at BHS. I've done a lot of reading since we started this quarantine, and I've probably read more in the last year than I have in the last 5 years combined. And the last one that I finished was Such a Fun Age by Kylie Reed, which is a really interesting book. So it kind of tells the story of a young African-American girl who is profiled in a situation and how these different white people in her life react to the situation. Yeah, it is a really fascinating read. Yeah, that's what I read.
Great, thanks for being here. I appreciate you representing theater, if I can say representing theater, but that's great to mix it up here. We have a lot of different subjects, and that's what we want in this grassroots effort. Appreciate that. We're gonna veer away from BHS, at least for the moment. I'm gonna go to Jadine.
Here we go. So I am from Shafter High. I teach ELD 2 and English 10. So shout out to my peeps. And let me see. The last thing I read was probably the Sunday comics. That's teasing. Maybe not so true. Last book was a very easy read of a Rob Lowe autobiography. It just wish it had more pictures. Other than that, that's probably the last book I read. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thanks, Jadine.
Good to see you again, Josh and Mindy and all my Shafter peeps out there.
Glad that you're here. I'm glad that you're part of this.
Yes.
Can we go to Martha?
Am I the only Martha?
I believe so.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm actually the counselor at Nueva High School, and I saw that Mary Beth was there, and I said, oh, Principal Shafter, you have one of my best friends there, Miss Ricketts. You're so lucky. But the last book that I read is 17 Carnations by Andrew Morton. I like to read either historical, not novels. What's the genre, Ms. Waddell? If it's not fiction, it's
Biography.
biography. Okay. And it has to do with the king that abdicated to marry the American socialite divorcee. I liked it because it has to do with World War II and the Nazis and all that controversy. And but my favorite genre is biography. And I don't know, what else were we supposed to say?
I think you covered it.
All right.
And I'm glad that you're here. And it's
Thank
great
you.
to have somebody from Nueva and a counselor. That communication is huge between teachers and counselors and administration and parents. So this is really a great mix. We haven't had a counselor yet, so you're our first one. And glad to have you here.
Thank you.
Can we go to, I'm sorry, is it Whitney? Ms. Waddell?
Yeah, Whitney. I teach at Nueva High School. I teach government, econ, health, and whatever else Martha tells me to teach. And, the last book that I read was by Octavia Butler. It's called Kindred. She was one of the very few Black women to rise to elite status in science fiction. And the book is about a modern day Black woman who is somehow time traveled back to an antebellum plantation, and how she brings her modern values and understanding of race back to an era, of course, of slavery. It's fascinating science fiction work.
Oh, wow.
Great. Sounds interesting. Thanks for being here. Appreciate that. And how about Mary Beth?
Oh, Mary Beth, you've got your mic muted.
I'm always muted. There we go. I'm Mary Beth Beadley, and I'm the assistant principal at Shafter High School. And I just wanted to jump in and just kind of see what was going on with this. Jadine actually introduced this book to us at a department chair meeting, I would say 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. And I read it back then, and I wanted to go back through it again. I think it's a wonderful concept. So that's why I'm here. And the last book that I've read, I do a book club with some of my girls, and we always read things that are, I mean, historical fiction and pretty heavy. Well, with everything going on, we decided we were going to read the series of books by Sarah Knight. I don't know if you're familiar with Sarah Knight or not. I can't really repeat what some of the titles are, but the life-changing magic of, then it says whatever it is, of not caring, but they're using it in another term. So these are actually practical parodies. So there's about 6 books in this series, and we are reading these, and they are absolutely wonderful, and they're light. And it's just, these books are more just about, taking control of who you are and being happy with yourself and not letting other people bring their stuff onto you, and just some really good conversation. So instead of doing the heavy stuff, we're doing some practical parody reading and getting some good laughs out of it during COVID. So that's what we're reading right now.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes that's what we need. The last book that I read, I have to admit, it was Gone Girl, right? So it's just not, before that was If Beale Street Could Talk by James Baldwin, but sometimes you need that. I appreciate you being here, Mary Beth, and, jump in as much as you want to or whatever, but appreciate again, that whole, that communication with teachers, administrators, counselors, parents, kids. It takes a village. So appreciate that.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad to see we got Shafter represented here in this cohort. I'm very glad. So yay.
Yeah, definitely. Well represented. Let's see. How about Natalie?
Hello, everybody. I'm Natalie Feinberg, and I teach at Shafter High. I have juniors this year, a lot of juniors. I'm doing a long-term sub in math. So, hey, shout out for the math. It's consumer, so even I can do that. And I read my Bible daily, so that's my current readings. I just finished Of Mice and Men the last semester with my kiddos, and I have a curiosity to read that trilogy from Ingersoll Lockwood from the past, and I just got it from Amazon, so I'm very curious to read that. I haven't started it yet, so. And I did checkbook math today, found an extra $150, so I was excited.
Thanks for being here, Natalie. I believe we have 3 more. How about to Sergio?
When I started this, just kidding. My name is Sergio Spain. I teach English at Bakersfield High, journalism at Bakersfield High. Last book I read, current book I'm reading right now is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. I'm also reading a book of poetry called Citizen Illegal by Jose Olivares. And I'm currently also reading Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography, Total Recall. The only problem is every time I read it, I hear his voice. It's a good book, though, if you want to read about somebody who lived the American dream like 4 or 5 times. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Great. I'm glad to have you, Sergio. Can we go to Zolma?
Hi, Zulma Guerra from Nueva. I teach math and also whatever Ms. Elias says that I need to teach.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. The book that I'm almost done with is Getting Organized. I love being organized, but there's a few things that I still need to work on, like everybody. But there's on the bright side there's a lot of things that I already do. So I was so happy to see that.
Great. Thanks for being here, Zolma. Appreciate that. Glad to have you. And I believe, last but not least, I've been trying to keep up, and sometimes like the names move around and stuff. You guys know how that goes. Judy, I think we haven't heard from Judy.
Hi, I was scrambling for the Zoom link and Mindy just sent it to me. So, and my camera won't start and I don't know why, it just said error. So sorry about that. So my name is Judy Ferris. I teach at Centennial. I teach science, intro to physical science. The book that I'm in the middle of is Opening Our Hearts, Transforming Our Losses. because I have a lot of losses. And what else? Is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay.
Thanks for being here. Okay, I'm counting unofficially maybe 10-ish subjects that are represented here. So that is great. That's great. Okay, did I miss anybody? Want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Okay, thank you for all the introductions. One of the big things that we want to try to do in this work is to support each other in a cohort model, because lots of times I think the truth is that when we undergo and we start grading reform, we are the ones who are different from other people on our campus. And sometimes there are pressures that come with that, with being different in terms of our grading practices. So the support can be really helpful. The PLC process is really helpful, but just having this larger group around campus, or I'm sorry, around the district, can be hopefully helpful as well. And so part of that is getting to know each other just a little bit. By the way, I didn't fully introduce myself, I don't think. I am at Highland High School. I am a department chair. I teach AP English Language and Composition. I also teach ELD. And I've been into grading work and reform and writing and research for about 10-ish years, something like that. And like I said, I am really excited about this work. So let's go ahead and move forward here just a little bit. Quick announcement. This is the book that we are using with Cohort 2 right now. I'm sorry, this is actually Cohort 1 we're using this book. They've been doing the work since about 2019 or so. And so it's called Making Grades Matter. And it really has some really practical ways to implement grading reform, especially what's known as standards-based grading with the PLC model. And the author, Matt Townsley, is going to be doing a special Q&A session with us. And you're all invited. This is February 11th. This is next Thursday from 1:30 till 3 o'clock. And even though most of you probably don't have this book, it would be great to have you there. And I actually have a link. I wonder if Mindy or Laura, I haven't been keeping up on the chat. Mindy or Laura, there's a link here. If you guys could if you could share the link to the presentation, that would be great, number one. And then there's a link here too. Sorry to ask so much. There's a linked doc where you can enter questions that you'd like Matt to answer. So Dr. Townsley is at Northern Iowa University, and he is probably considered one of the experts of standard-based grading in the country right now. So really happy to have him here. He's going to be here at 2 o'clock. And so we're going to kind of get it started at 1:30. So if you'd be there, that'd be great.
Laura, I can handle putting the links in if you don't have it handy.
Great, thanks, Mindy. Okay, so a little bit more specifically about the purpose of our work. So this is kind of our compass here. So when we're making decisions about what to do next session or whatever it is, want it to all center around this, and it is to improve teacher grading reporting practices, to increase that accurate communication of student learning and the equity of grades. So we want this work to center on the accuracy and equity of student grades, because we know that student grades, we all know that student grades are so important for many different things for students, right, for their current and future lives. And we also know that there are many problems with the traditional ways that grading has happened over the last 100 years or so. And you may not have known it's been that long, but I think we all know you're here because we know that there were issues with traditional grading. And when you get this book in the mail, the first few chapters, they talk about those problems in over the last 100 years or so. But again, we're focusing on increasing the accuracy and equity of grades. And that's what we want all of our work to focus on, really. And so, again, part of this time here, I wanted you to have an idea of kind of what this is about and what we're kind of expecting out of the work. So I want you to know some of these commitments, and feel free to, to ask us if you have any questions about it or concerns. But so here are those commitments. I'll just go through these briefly, and you can read them later if you want to in the slides. But the first is to read Grading for Equity. I have a reading schedule that I'll share with you on one of these slides coming up. We ask that you to commit with a team of teachers whenever possible, just because that support is really helpful, like I mentioned. Eventually, we're going to ask you to implement and study at least one reform grading practice. Now, I have a list here later in the presentation of 21 practices that are recommended by grading experts. We are not asking anybody to go all in right away, right? Take your time, make this work, internalize. But we're asking you eventually, once you get comfortable, to implement, right? To take action, because it's one thing we know to talk about things and read about things, but another thing to take action, especially when it's about equity. We will eventually ask that in this group we are open and willing to share evidence of grading and things that are traditionally not shared. Unfortunately, that I think has really slowed down the process of reform for grades is that traditionally, teachers are kind of hesitant to share grades, right? And for a lot of good reasons, right? We know that sometimes teachers are judged by the grades that they create, and there's a lot of other pressures that are on teachers. We're asking in this group to be willing to share the gradebook and grading policies and practices and concerns in the interest of improving the accuracy and equity again. We will be asking you to collect and share some evidence eventually. I keep saying eventually because we started right now in February just because we had a lot of demand right now. So we would normally start at the beginning of a school year. And I realized, in the middle of a school year, it's really hard to make any changes. And sometimes it might not even be right to make any big changes. So we really want this semester to internalize those practices, have discussion, and then be ready eventually. Now, maybe that's like a smaller change at the end of the school year. Maybe it's next school year, but to be preparing to make an active improvement. And so that's when the collecting and sharing of evidence would come in. And also committing to attending professional development. What we mean by that are these sessions. Okay, so those are some of the commitments, and feel free to read and closer if you like to, ask any questions, but want to let you know kind of, what we're expecting. So we're all in this and we know what we're getting ourselves into. Okay, so with that, we do have a fairly large group. So I think we're going to break into a couple, or actually a few breakout rooms. And I have 3 questions if we can discuss in those breakout rooms. And so hopefully everybody has this link to the presentation. So when you get to the breakout room, you can see these. But so those questions are, so what's your experience already with grading reform? I think we're coming, I'm assuming, from all different places. So we just want to get an idea kind of where we're at. We talk about that. What do you hope to get out of this work? If you have an idea, maybe you don't know right now, you're just trying to feel it out a little bit. Maybe you have a specific idea. And then also, what questions do you have right now? Okay, so those are the 3 questions it would be great if we can talk about. So I'm going to stop sharing here for a minute.
Josh, I put the questions in the chat too, so if they don't have the presentation over there.
Thanks, Mindy. All right, so we're not going to take a ton of time into breakout rooms, so we can get kind of right to it here, maybe around, let's say about 6 minutes or so. We'll try to go for that. Okay, and I'm gonna make it into 3 different rooms. So we have about 5 to 6 people in each of those. Let me just make sure really quick that we've mixed this up a little bit. Okay.
So we're not going to be with our site then?
Oh, I'm going to make it random. Okay, I hope we're okay with that. And so if it's something in particular that people would like to have some time to meet with the site, let me know, and I can, we'll try to fit that into the schedule in the future. But I think it'd be great to kind of mix it up here just a little bit. Okay, so the rooms are open. We'll take about 6 minutes or so, and then we'll come back after. Resume my recording again. So I'm just going to ask, let's see, just get a sampling. If you could share one idea that you talked about or somebody else did, one person from each room. I'm just gonna ask, how about Zoma, do you mind sharing from room 1, something you talked about or somebody in your room did?
Yes. We talked about a scale of 1 to 4 grading, using a scale from 1 to 4, and how I don't know. I know theater, the PLC for theater, they already do it, and they've been doing it since 2010, so they're already used to that. I was talking about maybe trying that next quarter, since our quarters are semesters. But first of all, we need to get used to the idea that the 4 is like an A and like a GPA. Okay, so we need to get used to that idea as teachers, so we can explain it to the kids every single time they have questions about it.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much what we talked about.
Great. Thanks for sharing. How about, so from room 2, Sergio, could you share something either you shared or your room did?
So I explained in my group that traditionally when I was a student teacher, I had a master teacher who was like, Sergio, you don't have to grade everything. You just give them a check if they turn it in and you can give them full credit. And this was a while ago. And, the longer I've been teaching, the more I realize, yeah, but that's not an effective way. That's not an effective way of understanding if they learn the concept. Are we trying to reward them for responsibility, or are we trying to reward them for a progression on a skill? So I've adopted this scale because, when you take that part of your brain out, when you stop trying to teach responsibility and have them understand a skill, the kids are more open to trying to learn instead of stressing out about the due date. That's what I covered.
Great, thanks for sharing. And then to room 3, how about Jadine, do you mind sharing an idea you guys talked about?
Sure. One idea that we talked about was the not grading homework. And I guess you could just equate it to a sports team, in that you really count the game is what matters. And at practice is where you just practice to get better and to use the coach's feedback. We didn't use that analogy in our group, but that's how I can pretty much explain the importance of not grading homework.
Thanks. I use that analogy about literally almost every single day with my kids in my classes. They're kind of sick of that analogy, I think. But yeah, good way to put that. Thanks for sharing, everybody. Interesting discussions for sure. All right. I hope one important thing in this work, I think, is that we maintain a growth mindset. After all, that's what we ask of our kids. All right. So I ask you to keep an open mind and a growth mindset about grading. And I'm sure some of these things are going to kind of, push you a little bit. You're going to struggle with. Some of them maybe make sense right away, but keep an open mind. And I want to just share a couple initial things, some problems with grading, because if we're going to go about making reforms, we have to maybe better understand the problems with traditional grading first. And I'm just gonna briefly talk about some things, and the book does a very thorough job in that in the first few chapters. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to talk about this in kind of the way that's presented in the book. I'm just very brief, as I mentioned. And then I'm going to ask also real quick, if you guys could use the chat, that would be great. Something that resonates with you from what I talk about here with problems with traditional grades, something that you question or maybe you don't agree with, or something you want to know more about. So something that resonates, something that you question, or tell me more. One of those 3 things, if we can use the chat, that'd be great. So first of all, an issue that we have in traditional grades is this idea of the hodgepodge grade. This is a term that was coined by Susan Brookhart in 1991, which basically means that traditional way of grading of putting like all kinds of stuff in one letter grade. So if we just count them out, let me see if I have enough fingers here to count all these different things that go in our grades traditionally. So we have obviously academic achievement as measured by tests. So quizzes, right? Formative assessments, behavior, attendance, participation, effort, growth. What am I missing here from traditional grading practices? Did I say homework? Homework, classwork, extra credit. Okay, I ran out of fingers. I'm gonna stop. So traditionally, all this stuff is into one grade. And it has to make us wonder, well, what does the grade really mean? What does it does? And the answer is it doesn't really mean much. It doesn't really mean much when you have all those different things into one letter grade. Each different part or category, however, specific we try to be with it, when we combine it all in one letter grade, doesn't really mean so much. And so we have there's an issue with accuracy. Another issue about accuracy is the percentage scale, right? 0 to 100%. That's just what school is, right? Like that's how we were graded. That's how our parents are graded. That's how our grandparents were graded. We keep going back generations. Why a 100-point scale? Actually 101, right? We go 0 to 100. So the book's going to talk about that. But if we really think about that, those different gradations, each number doesn't truly have a different meaning, right? If we want a scale that's accurate, each different level, each different gradation should have a meaning. Now, we oftentimes don't even think about that because that's the way that we just grade. And we don't even think like it's supposed to have a meaning traditionally. But there should be a difference, for example, between a 71 and a 73. What's the difference? I mean, the truth is that we cannot say a difference reliably. We cannot do that. The human brain cannot do that, right? There's lots of research that says anywhere between 4 to 5 levels, we can tell reliably 4 to 5 different levels of achievement, not 101. And not only that, but there are 60 levels of failure, 0 to 59. Why would we need 60 levels of failure? What is the difference between a 41 and a 46? What's the difference between a 7 and a 12? Right. You get the point here. Why would we need 60 different levels of failure? We are almost pushing a lot of our kids into failure. Why? Because that's the way we do it. No good answer. Averaging has some major issues because, as the math people know, well, there is so those very low or very high scores tend to have a lot of weight on moving that, right? So the measure of central tendency. And so what we oftentimes see for students is those who start slowly or make bad decisions at the beginning of the school year. Well, especially if we have that 100-point scale and they have a bunch of zeros, it just drags down that grade, right? And so is it really accurate in measuring their learning at the end of the school year? Big question marks about that. Bias. We know we've had lots of trainings now in our district, right, about implicit bias. And I think as teachers now and as a society, I think we're a lot more comfortable and maybe overall with the idea of bias and implicit bias. But bias plays a really big part in grades. It can. Now, one part is an institutional bias. And these are these policies that tend to be biased against certain groups of kids, right? Especially those who have fewer resources. So this could be something as simple as offering extra credit for bringing in supplies, right? If kids don't have the resources to do that, then they're not going to benefit from that. Could be things like assigning homework when it's tougher for certain kids to have extra time, or a quiet place, or help. Also implications for averaging. So certain groups of students may start the class in August behind. They may start in day 1 behind. And so therefore, they may score very poorly at the beginning of a class, but they may improve later. And if they improve later, they do improve later, but if there's averaging that's going on, their grade is going to be pulled down because they did not start at grade level or at the same level of other students that might have more privilege. So that would be an example of an institutional bias, while an implicit bias would be something that teachers inadvertently have bias against certain behaviors. For example, right, if we do grade effort, we grade behavior, we grade, and it's extremely subjective, right? And I think we would probably largely agree with that. But so just for example, to think about this, because there's lots of research that shows that teachers especially look at effort in borderline grades. If you're trying to figure out if you're going to give that kid that B or the C, right? They're like a 79, especially if there's a decimal in there, right? Oh, 79.5, which way do I go? How hard did they try? Well, what does it look like if a kid is really trying hard, right? What does that, well, it's probably based off of what we know is trying hard, or maybe it's about behaviors, right? And so we open the door basically for implicit biases as soon as we start grading things like behavior and effort and participation for that matter. And the last major issue or category of a problem with grading is motivation, right? And so we know traditionally grades and points, using points in the classroom are kind of like a classroom currency where we reward kids if they do what we want, and we punish them if they don't do what we want, right? We're giving points. Here you go. You came on time. You came early. You turned this in. You did this. Take it away if you don't do what I want, right? And so kids have been conditioned since probably about first grade. Kindergarten, right? Maybe not. Hopefully not. My daughter's in kindergarten right now, and she's starting to develop this concept of a report card, which I'm kind of worried about. She just got it last week, and but they're conditioned, and so when we kind of complain as teachers, right? Sometimes that kids, they just want points and they're not going to do anything without points. Well, we've taught them to be like that, right? So we have to shift that, right? That's getting to some of the solution. So that's part of the problem, and then also having that closed mindset, right? That either it's not okay to make mistakes is kind of what we're implying if we, for example, if we take off points for making mistakes in homework. Why'd you make a mistake is what we're implying if we take off a point in homework. But hey, isn't that where they're supposed to be making mistakes? Isn't that what the learning process is? To make mistakes and learn from mistakes. So sometimes we're sending these signals by our grading practices. We don't mean to, but I heard somebody mention in one of those breakout rooms, we were never taught, right? Teachers were not taught, I think it might have been Mark, in our teacher preparation classes, how to grade. It was trial by fire, right? So it's not about blaming, but it's about fixing the problem and moving on.
Actually, I was the one saying that I was probably one of the few people in school. That was a requirement for getting your teaching credential, is we had to take an assessment and evaluation class.
Okay, I guess I dropped into, it was too quick. Well, okay.
I went to Northern Iowa.
Okay, I did hear that part. I remember there's that connection to Matt Townsley, the author we're gonna see next week.
We had to take that class on how do you write a good test? How do you apply it to standards? How do you do assessment? And then I moved here and it's gone. So I'm glad to see it's taken 30 years to get here, but it's here.
That's interesting. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so I was in the group with him, and I was, he had just commented after I had stated, we were never taught, and he corrected and said, no, some of us were, but I think the majority of us on the West Coast have never been taught.
So I'm from Michigan. Okay, I guess I'm going to speak right now for the state of Michigan, just for the moment here. I was graded with when I was a kid, and my parents and grandparents in these traditional ways. I took my teacher prep classes in Michigan, was not either. And when I go out there and I talk to other teachers and friends and stuff like that, a lot of times I see their reforms are kind of behind ours, actually, and out here in California. So I think it kind of depends sometimes where you're at. But Mark, I'm sure that Matt would really appreciate that anecdote. That'd be interesting. I'd like to hear what he has to say about that. I don't know if it's an Iowa thing or what.
I wonder if they still do it.
That's a great question. Okay.
I think, often you hear this, well, we became teachers because we were good at school. And so we are recreating what we were proficient or excelled at. And someone in the chat said, do we know how to do school, in quotes? And I think our kids who have success have learned that formula of doing school, and it is artificial. My own child that's like super, super smart said, Mom, it's just a game, I just play it. And it always bothered me. My own son saw it as a game rather than like, the learning that I would hope he would think like,
Right. Yeah, definitely. I would love to continue this conversation right now. We're going to keep moving on just a little bit. One of the big things I want to try to make happen in each of our sessions, which normally are an hour and a half, is discussion, right? Kind of give some time for that thick discussion, as it's called sometimes in research, and then some learning happening, and kind of working with that learning as well, as well as getting to the book, right? That'll be a big emphasis. So something about the book here. It's called Grading for Equity. It was published in 2019 by Joe Feldman. And I really think, I truly feel like this is one of the best books that's on the market because of that connection to equity. I think it just makes it that much more important. This happens to be a topic that my dissertation was on, which I finished in 2015. It was equity in grading. And this was the book that kind of was in my mind like the whole time, even though it wasn't written then. And I guess I wish it was in some ways. In other ways, I wish I would have written it, but it's a great resource here. I am lucky enough to work with Joe Feldman now and some of the work that he does. And I just think it's a really good book. Like I said, we started back in 2019 with our first cohort, and I think it's worth continuing to use. So I have in this presentation, it's linked, a book study doc. Okay, and we have 3 more sessions after the special session next week planned for this school year in March, April, and May. All right, so those will be scheduled as hour-and-a-half sessions. And we're hoping to get through the book in that time. And hopefully you can do your best to keep up. I know everybody's busy with lots of stuff, but so there's kind of a schedule there. And I'll be sharing some stuff out. Mindy will be sharing some stuff out in email as well. All right, interesting time we have right now. It's 2:56. So Laura, I'm sorry I did this last couple of times, but Laura's going to be talking about action research. I apologize. So she has some good stuff to talk about. And so we're going to have to push that off for the moment. Let's finish with this if we can. If more than anything, what is something that you would like to get out of this work? Let's just open it up here. Anybody, it would be helpful for me as we continue to plan for our future sessions.
Why don't you have people respond in the chat too, Josh, and then we can save the chat and go back and look at it later on. So
that'd be great. Yeah, please do that. And I want to feel free to, if we get 1 or 2 comments on the mic also. Anybody like to share on the mic more than anything, something that you'd like to get out of this work?
I can. I mean, we shared that the theater PLC switched from a traditional grade scale a long time ago. But I still feel like grades are not entirely accurate. And I think it is some of what we've been talking about is this idea of, the kids that know how to do school figure it out, and then the ones that don't struggle to keep up, and just trying to figure out what practices can make it more equitable and more accurate to what the kids are actually learning.
Yeah, that's a great point, Heather, because those kids, those kids who can play school well, they have parents oftentimes who could play. They taught them. And those are families who, are more privileged. And so the kids who can't play school as well have less privilege. And that's where the equity piece comes in, where we want to level that playing field. We have time for one more.
Hey, honestly, Josh, I'm sorry, I kind of vomited all over the chat. I apologize. Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I would certainly like is to just get the kids to stop focusing on the grades and focus on the learning. I think what drives me nuts is like when there were students in the halls or whatever we have here at Ridgeview, that they're just talking about point distribution, grade weights with each other. I want them to talk about like the ideas that are being conveyed in class, beauty with a big B, truth with a big T, and engaging with those things, the human condition. And it seems like that grade talk is something that is a distraction and antagonistic to that conversation and ultimately to their growth as a human being.
Yeah, that's a great point, Cody. And I think that's all about, shifting that school culture from the grades to the learning. And that any time it's about shifting of culture, it takes time and patience, and it takes as many people as possible. We can start though, right? We can't get everybody on board, but we can sure start. And, but that's, that's a process for sure.
Well, yeah, and it really, holy cow, oh geez. And there was the language that we use. You've heard my jag about work and just saying work and just kind of how just the language that we use actually kind of like distracts from the learning. And so, I mean, then that's part of the culture, language culture. But yeah, I mean, it's the whole idea that when we start changing our language, then we're starting to change our perceptions. We don't speak language, language speaks to us. So.
Yeah. Appreciate that. I think that's a good thing to finish with. And that was the bell, what we heard there on Cody's end. So our next session will be again next Thursday. I hope you can make it. We'll be sending out some information over email. Feel free to ask questions, things like that. We didn't make it through the whole agenda. I encourage you, if you get a chance, look through the other slides that we didn't get to. Feel free to reach out, and the reaching out again, feel free to, whether it's about specific questions about grading or broader things and things like that. So thank you for coming. I appreciate that. Our first session, it seemed like it went really quickly, and we're going to try to continue to make our format as beneficial and user-friendly as possible to get the most out of our time, because we know we have lots of work to do. So thanks for coming by. Appreciate that. And I look forward to seeing you guys hopefully next Thursday, or if not that, then in March. Thanks for coming. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Josh, if you could save the chat, that would be helpful.
Yes, I will. Let me